Hey guys, once again it's the Professor, and I'm about to do quite possibly the most dangerous thing and most dangerous commentary I have done as of yet. I'm going to be looking at Jfreedan's video where he comes back at, I believe it was Grey Wolf Studios, and their comments about the difference between JRPG and WRPG. Now, for anyone who knows about Jfreedan, he has a tendency to flag and take down videos that do not agree with him. And he usually uses things like harassment and hate speech behind his purposes and the flagging. So to do this, I am going to attempt to do a commentary on him using nothing but sense and logic to do this, while keeping away from flaming and hate speech and harassment as much as I can. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get started and look at this.
So, Clan of the Grey Wolf recently did a 16-bit gem video on Lufia 2, and in it, they included a little rant that's a counter-argument to the movement I'm trying to do, where people will stop using the JRPG label to define games as a genre. And I just wanted to respond to it a little bit and point out some of the huge fallacies in the argument.
So, what makes this game a gem in my mind? Well, it's just a damn fine example of a classic JRPG. And yes, I'm using the term JRPG, or Japanese role-playing game, despite a small but concentrated movement out there that proposes this is not a real term. Why mention those people? Well, because in cyberspace, everyone can hear you scream.
They're listening.
And I feel I need to challenge this assertion before it gains too much steam.
Challenge the assertion before it gains too much steam. Or the alternate explanation that it makes sense, and that terrifies me, because I've been saying something stupid for many years, and I don't want to change my videos and update it, or admit I was wrong.
Wait, so you are saying that he's not allowed to start a counter-argument against someone saying we should not use JRPG and WRPG as labels for describing different games? Why would you attack him for making a counter-argument? You do know that this is kind of what people do in a debate.
So, please indulge me as I get on my soapbox for a minute.
Why are we in your bathroom?
Okay, allow me to answer your unnecessary question with an unnecessary answer. If you took the time to notice, this was used as a joke. He sat on a soap tray on the counter in his bathroom to make a joke out of soap box. Now hopefully that answers your completely and totally unnecessary question in your little response, commentary, rant, whatever you want to call this.
To me, most gamers, game developers, and game journalists nowadays, JRPG is a well-known term, if a bit of a misnomer.
Yes, the term is known. That doesn't mean that everybody uses it the same way, or agrees on what the hell it's supposed to mean.
Misnomer. Noun. A wrong name or inappropriate designation. Now, I am trying to determine whether you are agreeing with him or if you didn't know the definition of misnomer. Your last statement could actually go both ways, though I believe you were trying to raise an argument against his statement that's just really not clear to see from what you said.
Such games might be better described as Japanese-style RPGs, since not all such games come from Japan, especially nowadays. However, the style of these games was popularized, and some would say perfected, in Japan, which is an important distinction. What do I mean when I use the term JRPG? Basically, RPGs that are reminiscent of the style popularized by Dragon Quest in 1986.
So let me get this straight. You're implying that Xenogears has a great deal of elements in common with Dragon Quest.
Well, yes he is, and that makes perfect sense. Turn-based battle systems, deep engrossing linear storylines, vast wide open worlds shown via a open world map, and multiple characters to use. Those are just naming a few. It does share items with Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, Shin Megami Tensei franchise, and many other great RPGs that just so happen to come from Japan.
Okay, I'll give you that, but it also has the same exact elements in common with wizardry.
and Wizardry would technically be considered a JRPG due to the fact that it was developed, produced, and licensed in Japan.
And Ultima. And pretty much every other computer RPG ever made.
They usually, though not always, contain linear gameplay, a simplified level-up system, turn-based battles, and, well, for lack of a better word, melodramatic plots.
Ugh. I have to dissect this. Turn-based battle systems. How many people out there watching this video have heard people consider Secret of Mana to be a JRPG, or any other action RPG to be a JRPG? You don't have to search very hard to find an action RPG or a Tales of game or something considered to be a JRPG. So turn-based obviously cannot be considered to be a universally well-accepted mechanic in JRPGs.
Well, first off, if you listen to him, he was saying that this is usually a used mechanic in a JRPG. He never stated that this is a universal style for JRPGs, just one of the many. Plus, using your own example, Secret of Mana, one of my personal favorite games to ever be created, it is in fact a JRPG.
Next, character customization. Are you serious? Are you freaking serious? Choosing your character's race and sex and name, that's considered character customization in lieu of completely customizing your character's abilities using extremely abstract and complex systems like a license board from Final Fantasy, or in this one game, Final Fantasy VI, that you pointed out, the Esper system. That is way more complex than what you find in your typical BioWare title.
So, the Esper system allowed every character in the game to learn every magic spell and is more complex than Dragon Age. Well, let's take a real quick look, shall we? In Dragon Age, you picked your race, your gender, then you customized the character model, you chose which class you wanted to have, selected which skills you wanted, which feats you wanted, and then you had the ability to choose more skills and classes under the multi-class system that it had. Comparing that level of customization for a character to the Esper system in Final Fantasy VI, well, yes, I guess I can see how Final Fantasy has more customization, if I just so happen to have just got done beating my head with a hammer beforehand.
And then, lastly, melodramatic story. That's pretty much every computer RPG since the mid-'80s, regardless of where the hell in the world it was made.
Really? Can you please give some examples of this? Plus, you are using this computer RPG tagline a lot. I am starting to wonder on what your definition of computer RPG is. Because you do realize that a lot of the RPGs nowadays, like, say, Dragon Age and Fallout 3, were released not only on computer, but also on console. So what would that make those? Because you've been saying console RPG and computer RPG a lot. What would these that have been released on both areas be called?
Good examples would be Dragon Quest III, Final Fantasy VI, and Xenogears.
No, a good example would be pretty much every computer RPG made since Ultima 3.
You know, I can really respect people trying to make a point, but next time, explain the things you are saying and the reasons behind the statements that you are making.
Conversely, I would categorize Western-style RPGs as having been heavily influenced by the tabletop RPGs that came to prominence in the 70s and 80s, like Advanced Dungeons & Dragons.
Every computer RPG ever made descends from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Every single one of them. Not just the Western ones. Do your research.
They generally, though not always, have...
Generally, but not always. If it's not always, then your definition is useless for classifying games as a genre. It has to be all the time in order for it to be a useful classification.
Wait, so are you going to tell me that all computer RPGs are exactly the same and never have elements that differ from one another? If you cannot tell me yes, then your definition for labeling games as computer RPG as a genre does not work either. Now this is using your own logic.
Dissecting the elements of this creative product to define it as a separate thing from another thing. That means that always it must have these elements. That's the difference between a tragedy and a comedy. They have different elements of the story, of the plot, and games are the same way.
Okay, let me guess. You think that comedy cannot have a little bit of tragedy inside of it, and that a tragedy or a drama can't have any splashes of comedy within them. Have you ever watched a Mel Brooks movie? They added tragedy or drama on occasion. Plus, many of the great Shakespearean works and what was considered comedy during the time put within it in the original conception. So, using your logic again, Shakespeare is not one of the greatest tragic writers of all time, and Mel Brooks is not one of the funniest screenwriters to ever exist.
The unique mechanic that defines it as a thing is not in there. How are you supposed to define it? How can it be that thing if it doesn't always have it? You make no damn sense.
More freedom in their gameplay.
Alright, freedom in gameplay. You're talking about the dialogue trees, the choose-your-own-adventure style narrative plots. Okay, if we're comparing, like, say, Final Fantasy VI, that is a narrative like Harry Potter, and Fallout 3 is like a choose-your-own-adventure novel. Sure, there's a little bit more option to explore within the narrative, but it's not really freedom. It's like a maze. Is it really freedom? You cannot go any path that hasn't been decided for you. There's generally only one or two correct paths through the game. All the other ones are dead ends. At least when you're reading Harry Potter, there's no dead ends. And it's the same way with Final Fantasy VI. So I wouldn't really consider it to be freedom. I just consider it to be a different experience.
Now, as you say, let's go ahead and dissect this last statement. By your logic and what you are saying, having the ability to choose a path to take a storyline out of multiple different branching options that can lead into each other depending on your decisions, and having the ability to build your character's personality is not freedom, because there is a definite ending somewhere in the storyline no matter what you do. Really, just let that one sink in for a minute. I will give you the time. There. Has that simmered into your brain? Let's put this into a real-life usage. I can say by using this logic that you don't have freedom in life, despite the truth that is free will, to make choices along the way, because at the end of it all, you will die. Does that make sense? I thought freedom meant having the ability to make choices on what path you wanted to take, despite the fact that there is an inevitable end somewhere along any given path that you choose.
Customization and character creation and level up options.
Alright, this one's just plain wrong. Play more games, dude. You haven't played that many if you think that there's more Western RPGs that have better character customization options than the JRPG ones. The Japanese make way more complex games when it comes to character customization. Way more complex. Do not be fooled by the option to choose a race and class. This very mundane, basic Dungeons and Dragons style character customization. What the Japanese are doing is above and beyond, way more. There's more depth to it. There really is. And it's foolish to think otherwise. I mean, half of BioWare's games are based off of Dungeons and Dragons. Either Advanced Dungeons and Dragons or Dungeons and Dragons 3.5. That's not very complex. It's complex, I guess, within tabletop RPGs, but not within computer RPGs. Computer RPG land is way more complex than that.
Wow. Can I ask you once again to give some examples that prove your side of this story? Can you tell me of any JRPGs that actually have more customization set up than D&D? Plus, going by this statement, I have to say that you really have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to D&D. I have played D&D for years. I also play Shadowrun, Star Wars D20, and many other great tabletop games. Here is what I want you to do. Pick up any one of those game character creation manuals or a player's manual, and then look at the amount of classes, races, skills, spells, physical augmentations, abilities, traits, feats. The list goes on for items used in customization of a character. There has never been a console on computer-based RPG that has matched the customization ability used in a tabletop RPG. If there has, I want examples to come from you, RPG fanatic, whose name seems to be a misnomer at this point of the video, because your RPG fanaticness isn't showing through by your statement so far.
Real-time battles and...
The overwhelming majority of non-Japanese computer RPGs, ones made by American and British designers, do not have action, real-time battle systems. They don't. They're turn-based. Do your research. Go through the 80s and the 90s and see the majority are turn-based.
Okay, so Fable doesn't have real-time battle? Fallout doesn't have real-time battles? Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 doesn't have real-time battles? Command and Conquer, Black and White, Diablo, StarCraft, Warcraft? All of these games are, quote, Western RPGs, unquote, and they all use real-time battle system. All he is saying is that for the most part, Western developers prefer to use real-time battle structures. Not that all of them use real-time battle. Yes, some Western developers use and have used turn-based battles. I will also have to agree that when it first started, 90% of all RPGs that were made were turn-based battle. But there is no denying the fact that WRPGs, or European RPGs, have been moving to a more and more real-time battle-based system. That is sadly a fact you need to accept.
There's only a handful of companies right now making largely real-time ones. And most of them are massively multiplayer online RPGs, not single-player games.
And branching plot threads.
The overwhelming majority of American-produced computer RPGs do not have branching plot threads. They are not all choose-your-own-adventure novels.
Good examples would be Baldur's Gate, Fallout, and Knights of the Old Republic.
The examples that pretty much everybody tries to use when they talk about Western computer RPGs. Yeah, they exist. They do not represent the majority of computer RPGs made by American or European or pretty much anybody. They don't represent the majority of games made outside of Japan. They don't. I'm sorry. That's ridiculous. Do your homework.
Once again, you're trying to make a point while not giving example. This does not make you seem credible. Ending a statement with, do your homework, does not help your argument. It puts off an impression that you have no idea what you're talking about because there is no evidence to back up your claims, or that you're just too lazy to do the research yourself and want us to do it for you. I'm sorry, but the point has to go to the other guy because despite the fact that you complained about his examples, at least he is able to give some, and not just try to put out information and his opinion without any proof whatsoever to back him up.
Some may prefer to use the terms console and PC RPGs instead of Japanese and Western. Well, whatever floats your boat.
Whatever floats our boats. Look, I don't know how old you are. I don't know how long you've been gaming. It can't have been that long. If you had been on the internet back in the early 90s, you would know console style and PC style are the oldest terms people are still using to define computer RPGs. They're very old. Game FAQs, the oldest, you can look it up if you like, the oldest website for categorizing and listing video games uses console style and PC style as broad definitions for certain types of games. Pokemon, Final Fantasy, console style. Baldur's Gate, PC style. These do have meanings. It's not a small movement. It's the oldest movement. JRPG is the small, commonly used word by people who really don't know any better. And what I'm trying to do and what other people are trying to do is inform you that you're misusing genre labels that really don't exist and don't apply to anything, and it's really confusing the hell out of people.
Well, I have to think that the fact that 90% of the reviewers across the whole spectrum of video game reviewing and the gaming community use JRPG to label games of a certain style does in fact prove that the label does exist.
I won't debate that most JRPGs have come out on consoles and most Western RPGs have come out on the PC platform.
Unless, you live in Japan and you can play both genre of games on personal computers. I'm just saying. Or,
Okay, so what is your point? That's really not a real argument against this statement. Saying that most come out on one or the other cannot be defeated by saying, well, some of them didn't come out on both. Seeing as well, that is what he actually said in the first place.
You're really involved in the indie scene here in America and Canada and Europe and pretty much everywhere that isn't Japan with the RPG maker community.
Wait, hold on, wait. You're going to pull games that are made in RPG Maker into a discussion that is based on mainstream RPGs? Okay. Well, I guess I have to say I am actually intrigued to see where you're going to go with this argument. Let's continue.
And other various programs that people are using to make computer RPGs. People use Game Maker to make console-style RPGs to play on a computer. There's a variety of developers making original console-style RPGs that are not from Japan for play on a computer, you know. Unless you want to forget all about them, then yeah. What you said is completely correct. There's very few console-style on the computer.
Okay, so because they're not from Japan, they're not JRPGs. Well, I guess that can make sense, and I can see where you're coming from on that one. But you do realize that RPG Maker makes games using the same style that is used in JRPGs. This is a program that was made by the Japanese to make RPGs, in the style that originated in Japan. This would technically make the origin of these games Japan and still qualify them as JRPGs, and if nothing else, they are still using the same format as a JRPG. Did you get all that? Plus, why are you using indie and RPG Maker games for this discussion in the first place? As far as I could tell, this was concerning mainstream games.
But if that's the case, then people are just arguing different terms for the same things. And it's also true that those lines are becoming more blurred as time goes on. But to disavow the term JRPG completely is nitpicking at best and disingenuous at worst.
It's not really an argument of semantics. It's an argument from a scientific point of view. The fact of the matter is you cannot define something unless you can dissect it and see what its base elements are. You're not doing that. You're generalizing thousands of games as being the same thing. You're putting them all under the same house simply because they come from one nationality. That's not how science works. That's not how game design works. You don't understand game design if you think that.
Okay, well, once again, let's dissect your statement scientifically, as you so eloquently put it. You say he is generalizing a large array into JRPG and WRPG due to a nationality, correct? Well, using the logic of your own statement, that would mean that you are generalizing games as well by calling them console and computer RPGs. You are calling them these names due to the method and platform they are released on. Do you happen to see the hypocrisy in your statement up to this point? Now, don't complain about one person doing something when you yourself do the exact same thing. Plus, I am getting pretty sure he was dissecting the games and their styles pretty well at the beginning of the video. Let's just go ahead and have a little look here, shall we?
They usually, though not always, contain linear gameplay, a simplified level-up system, turn-based battles, and, well, for lack of a better word, melodramatic plots.
Well, that seems like a pretty decent look at the detail of the games to me. Is that scientific enough for you?
And it's clear that you do. You don't understand game design. You don't think critically about it, or you wouldn't be saying the things that you're saying. You haven't really done your research in this subject. What you have to understand is that to advance the field of game design, game theory, game appreciation, for games to be considered a serious art form, there needs to be real theory. There needs to be a real understanding of what makes these games what they are, how to classify them.
You need to think like me! Become a robot of the Jfreedan RPG Fanatic Union. We will all unite under one flag and destroy all the unbelievers. Okay, sorry, I couldn't help but make that one. I couldn't help but pull that one off. Because, you see, he is really coming off as a huge elitist right now.
This is the same problem we had with film. People would not take film seriously as an art form until film critics came along and started dissecting the parts of the stories, the style elements, the way things were shot, the use of music, until they started to create an actual broad theory for the creation and production of films and what they're supposed to mean.
Okay, where is your source that states film critics caused the industry to rise? From the research I have done, it seems that the rise of the film industry was mostly due to two movies, Birth of a Nation, released in 1915, and The Jazz Singer, which was the first movie with synchronized audio, by the way, released in 1920. Now, the earliest I can find on film critics in the history of Hollywood is in the year 1935, when the New York Film Critics Circle was formed. This was 15 years after The Jazz Singer was released. So you're trying to tell me that critics caused a movie that was released 15 years earlier, before home video was around, to be popular enough to spark the golden age of Hollywood. I guess I can buy that if I didn't do my own research and just happen to believe what people say.
Video games have to have the same exact thing happen to them, and that's not gonna fucking happen if people like you are out there saying JRPG, JRPG, and not understanding yourself what the hell you're talking about. Because you don't. You don't.
So, critics and reviewers cannot give a good critical analysis due to most people labeling the game as a JRPG. Well, I don't know about you, but most good critics still look into the depth of the game despite a label given to them. Look at Yahtzee, also known as Zero Punctuation. He hates JRPGs, but still looks into the game completely and covers all aspects of the game before making a decision. That seems to contradict your statement completely.
It's a matter of nomenclature, history, and cultural predilections.
Okay, if you can find a game review magazine that used the term JRPG before the year 2000, I will give you a cookie. It's a pretty new term created by the new generation of game journalists, who, by the way, are not highly trained in game mechanics and just say whatever the hell they want.
Okay, so you're saying we need to be highly trained in game mechanics to make a determination on whether or not a game's controls, storyline, graphics, etc. are good. Is that what you were trying to say? That we all need to go to school for a career in gaming before we can truly know what a good game is? Well, here's the thing. Reviewers and critics give their opinions just like all of us do. That is the thing. An opinion is a personal thought. You do not need to be trained to make one. That is kind of like saying, until you go to culinary school, you're not allowed to make or have the ability to determine what a good steak is.
The first use of it, best as I can trace on using the internet, was used to insult games like Romancing Saga Minstrel Song. And, basically to nitpick and to say, hey, why isn't this like Fallout? Why isn't this like Knights of the Old Republic? Why isn't this like that?
So, because one article uses a term to make an insult, then it will always be an insult from that point forward. So, that would really mean if I said, you are a carrot, in a derogatory manner, from here on out, carrot would be an insult.
It's basically how the term was used. So, that'll come into the next segment where we talk about the racism element.
Wait, the what?
And as to those who think it's racist to use the term JRPG, well, first of all, in a No Duh the Magazine exclusive, I believe the term Japanese constitutes a nationality, not a race.
Racism is discriminating or making a value judgment on someone based on entirely, or at least largely, because of their ethnic background. This means ethnic background includes nationalities. The Japanese actually do consider themselves to be a unique race, and I don't know if you know this or not, but there's actually a great deal of anti-everybody else except the Japanese inside Japan.
Okay, so that would explain why 90% of all characters designed in anime and video games have a distinct Western European or American design and characteristic. Well, who knew this is how they were going to show that they hated everyone else?
But that's a different topic in its own. The important thing is this. A lot of people, especially a lot of professional game reviewers, use the JRPG label to discriminate and make a value-based judgment on the games simply because they're from Japan. You don't believe me? Take a look on the internet. Some of the ones you posted yourselves, is JRPG a dying breed? They're basically taking the hundreds and hundreds of games that are made in Japan, that are computer RPGs, putting them all under one house and saying they're all the same thing, when they're not. They're everything from roguelikes to action RPGs. There's a lot of visual novels in there which have computer RPG elements. Some of them are on computers, some of them are on consoles. It's ridiculous. And it's hype, and it's nonsense, and it is racist.
Holy crap. Where do we go with this? I really need to try and point out just how asinine this statement is somehow. Let's see. Oh wait, I've got it. How about this? Japanese car dealerships make a large assortment of car types, from sports cars, sports utility vehicles, passenger cars, etc. Now, even though they are all different types of cars, if I was to say that they are Japanese cars because they were manufactured in Japan, it would be racist. Does that about sum it up? So next time you hear someone state that the Nissan you just passed on the road was a nice-looking Japanese car, you need to call the police and report them for a hate crime against Japanese cars.
And the big reason that makes it racism is because in the same articles, the same breath that they insult the Japanese developers, they praise the American ones. Even though there's not that big of a difference between what the Americans are doing and the Japanese are doing if you really dissect the games down to their elements, their actual mechanics. There's not that many differences.
Well, why don't you go ahead and compare a definite JRPG that no one can deny is a Japanese game, such as any of the Shin Megami Tensei series, to Dragon Age? How much do they have in common? Nothing, other than the fact that they are both on consoles.
So that's called racism, because it's largely being determined by the ethnic background of the developers, where the games are coming from. An us versus them mentality. It's fucking racism.
So, what you are saying is that if someone was conceived, produced, and developed in Japan, it would be racist to call them Japanese, all because the people who did the conception, production, and development are in fact from Japan. Do you see how this particular line of logic you just laid out does not work when you, quote, dissect it scientifically, unquote?
And the reason it boils my blood to see this kind of racism is because as a game designer, as a storyteller, as a game journalist, who actually keeps his eyes and ears open and looks at what's happening around him, I understand the kind of craft and dedication and the long-ass hours of overtime, which they often are not paid for. I understand the kind of hell that a lot of these game designers have to go through to make these games, to get them out there. I understand the millions of dollars that are put into these games. And then some jackass on a blog comes along, takes one look at the cover art, decides that he doesn't like the anime style, he doesn't like it because it's a Japanese game, and takes a big old crap all over it on the internet for all people to see, for other people to use his blog, his game article in some official magazine. The audience uses that information to decide whether or not they even want to rent the damn game, let alone buy it.
Well, an opinion on a game, or really anything in particular, is just that, an opinion. The people who read said blog have the choice to believe them and take their word, or to make their own opinions themselves. Why the hell do you blame the reviewer for choices that other people make? That is part of free will. We have the ability to decide on things like this for ourselves. Plus, I played this long section just to show you he reminds me of another YouTuber who gets a lot of unwarranted views.
Dear black people of the world, but I have white people in my blood. White people haven't gotten theirs, but every other race has! On me, okay? I know what it's like to be, hated on.
Yeah, that's kind of creepy, isn't it?
There's people's jobs on the line here. There's people's careers on the line here. And a lot of game journalists are not taking this shit seriously.
So, hold on. The loss of jobs in Japan is all due to the fact that people are using JRPG as a label for game. How the hell does that work? Are you going to say that people in America don't buy a game because it is a JRPG, that Japanese people are going to lose their jobs, despite the fact that they never sell as well here as they do domestically back home in Japan? The sales of these games are huge in Japan. I really don't think that using a simple label such as JRPG is going to cause people in Japan to lose their jobs.
And that pisses me off. So, if I want to call them a bunch of racist assholes for being racist assholes, I'm going to, because this does matter.
Okay, in other words, if you don't agree with him, he will call you a racist asshole. Then, sir, I would ask you to allow me to call you a cynical asshole if I want to.
Secondly, is it racist to ascribe a genre that first became popular amongst a certain group of people to that same group?
Oh no, that's not racist. It's not any more racist than, you know, all the black jokes about grape drink and chicken and pretty much every other racist joke ever made based on a stereotype.
So labeling something as a JRPG is the same level as making the statement of all African Americans love grape soda, watermelon, and fried chicken. I fail to see this. I hope you realize how insensitive to the minorities in America your statements are making you seem. You are effectively lowering a group of people to the same level as an item that is mass-produced for others to purchase and enjoy in the comfort of their homes from a mass market. Do you see how you are marking African Americans by your own statements to the same level as merchandise to be sold in a store? Do you see how this can be misinterpreted to say that you support slavery? Did you think your comments through before saying them?
No, not racist at all. Continue.
Is it racist to say that sushi is a Japanese food? I say no.
No, it's not racist to say that sushi is a Japanese food. It is racist to say that only the Japanese are capable of making sushi, or that only the Japanese like sushi. The reason I bring that up is because there are a lot of game reviewers who have published that these games are antiquated and stupid and silly and perverse. They've made fun of the chibi look, the cute look, and saying that pretty much only the Japanese like this stuff and everybody else doesn't like it. That actually is kind of racist.
You know, that's really not racist as much as it is being highly misinformed.
It's deeply insulting, and if you're insulting someone based on their race, yeah, it's racist.
Okay, and up next we got both a failed attempt from a joke from the original video and from Jfreedan himself. So just to spare you guys of the horror of having to watch this, I'm going to go ahead and skip it. We're going to go towards the end of the video.
That was fun. This has been my retort to the Clan of the Grey Wolves rant about JRPG label and the minor movement we have going here for people to stop using the term and start to classify games based on their elements and not based on, sorry to say, bullshit.
Okay, base it on their elements, such as gameplay and the battle system. I agree with you on this. That seems to be what we have already been doing, though, when we label them as a JRPG. What you are doing is labeling them based on the media format that they are released on.
If you have any comments, go ahead and put them in the comment bar below.
You know, I would go ahead and leave a comment down there, but you happen to remove this video from YouTube. And for that, I would also have to say, thanks to Sarleari, I don't know how to pronounce his name, here it is, I'll put it on the screen for you, for giving me this copy of the video. You, sir, are an hero.
As for myself, I need to go house hunting so that we can get this RPG Fanatic show back on track and I can start producing good videos versus crap like this that doesn't have a lot of production values.
You know, higher production values do not make a video better. Hell, if that was the case, Chris Boers would have the best videos on YouTube because they are in production for months at a time.
Stay tuned.
And which I will have to say I am not going to stay tuned. So, what do I think at the end of all this? What are my final thoughts? Well, I have to say Jfreedan has a few issues. One, he does not understand what it is to generalize. Two, he doesn't understand how big of a hypocrite he is when he does exactly the same thing he keeps bitching about. Three, he does not understand the idea of racism. Four, he could very well become the next copper cab the way he's going. And five, he is an insensitive, unempathetic prick. Really, comparing JRPG label to racism is just as bad as when GyroHedgy453 compared his haters and trolls to the Holocaust. I am not surprised that you removed this particular video from YouTube, seeing as it proves way too much about you that you don't want out there in the open. But nonetheless, this is the Professor, and I think I'm going to go ahead and get started making up a backup account and then promptly scrub my brain afterwards. I'll go ahead and see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.